The Howl Beneath the Moon epigraph. The darkness beneath the moon is where all truths lie hidden. Eleanor Blackwood, Town Historian. Chapter 1. Arrival in Ravenwood. The Howl Beneath the Moon. The town of Ravenwood huddled under a blanket of darkness. Its houses nestled between the sprawling trees like silent sentinels. A sense of unease trickled through Ethan Carter as he navigated the deserted streets, his footsteps echoing ominously against the quietude. The moon cast long, elongated shadows across the cobblestones, and Ethan's instincts told him someone or something was watching from the darkness. He had come to Ravenwood under strange circumstances. A series of gruesome murders in a town seemingly disconnected from modern civilization had piqued his interest. Intrigued by the mysterious nature of these killings, Ethan had left behind his comfortable life as a skeptical journalist to delve into the unknown. As he pulled up to the dingy motel on the outskirts of town, he could hear the distant howling of wolves. It was unsettling, yet familiar, a reminder of an event from his childhood that still haunted him. The sound seemed to grow louder with each passing moment, and Ethan's steps faltered as he climbed out of the car. He could feel the chill of unease settle deep in his bones as he made his way toward his room. The sheriff, Robert Mills, had been waiting for him at the motel. He was a tall man with an imposing presence, his face etched with deep lines that spoke of a life marked by hardship and responsibility. As Ethan approached, he noticed Mills' gaze flickering between the journalist and the surrounding darkness. The sheriff's eyes seemed to hold a mixture of suspicion and resignation, as if he knew what was about to unfold. "Welcome to Ravenwood, Mr. Carter," Mills said curtly, offering Ethan a stiff handshake. "I hope you won't be staying for too long." "I'm here to help, Sheriff," Ethan replied, trying to hide the unease that gnawed at him. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Mills hesitated before replying, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something unseen. "Well, Mr. Carter, what we're dealing with is a series of brutal attacks by wild animals." He paused, then added in a low voice, "But there's something different about these attacks, something that doesn't quite add up." "So, you think it might be more than just an animal attack?" Ethan pressed, sensing the sheriff's reluctance to divulge any further information. Mills nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Ethan's face. "I can't say for sure, but there are things happening in Ravenwood that don't make sense." As they continued their tense conversation, the distant howling grew louder and more ominous. It was as if the wolves were trying to communicate something, a warning or a threat. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled into a world of darkness and danger, one where nothing was quite as it seemed. The wolves howled outside, their mournful cries piercing the night air and filling Ethan's bedroom with an inescapable sound. Each note seemed to carry a burden of sorrow and warning, stirring dark memories he'd long tried to bury. He closed his eyes, attempting to shut out the haunting melody, but it lingered, a relentless reminder of the shadows lurking beyond the silver light of the moon. He could no longer recall what had happened in those days when he was younger, though the fear that gripped him then still clutched at his heart now. The wolves' cries only served to heighten that dread, making it harder for him to find peace in the darkness. The next morning, Ethan ventured into the town, eager to explore and gather information about the murders. As he made his way down the main street, he noticed a small bookstore with a sign that read, "Serena Vaughn Bookseller." Curiosity piqued, Ethan decided to pay a visit. The bookstore was dimly lit, its shelves filled with dusty tomes and antique artifacts. A soft hum of voices drifted from the back room, where a young woman was busy organizing books. She had long dark hair that cascaded down her shoulders and piercing green eyes that seemed to hold a world of secrets. The woman's words emerged almost inaudibly, a faint ripple in the oppressive silence of the room. Her hand trembled slightly as she spoke, betraying an inner turmoil that threatened to spill out. Her eyes darted nervously around, searching for any sign of danger or comfort amidst the dimly lit space. Ethan hesitated before replying. "Yes, I'm looking for information about the recent attacks in Ravenwood," she said finally, her words so soft they seemed almost lost in the rustling leaves overhead. "Ravenwood is a small town, and we prefer to keep our secrets to ourselves." The woman glanced at him warily, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to discern his intentions. "I'm afraid I can't help you," she said finally, her words barely audible. "Ravenwood is a small town, and we prefer to keep our secrets to ourselves." Ethan felt a surge of frustration welling up inside him, but he knew better than to press the issue. Instead, he left the bookstore with more questions than answers, questions that would lead him deeper into the shadows of Ravenwood, where darkness and danger lurked just beneath the surface. As the days passed, Ethan found himself drawn further into the mysterious world of Ravenwood. He began to investigate the town's history, learning about its dark past and the myths and legends that still haunted the inhabitants. He visited the local library, where he stumbled upon a journal belonging to Serena Vaughn, the woman from the bookstore. The journal contained accounts of supernatural occurrences in Ravenwood, as well as information about an ancient curse that had plagued the town for generations. Ethan's curiosity was piqued, and he began to delve deeper into the world of the supernatural world that seemed all too real in the shadows of Ravenwood. As he researched the curse, he discovered it was linked to a series of unsolved murders that had occurred over 100 years ago. The more Ethan learned about the curse's connection to the murders, the more he began to suspect there was a darker truth lurking beneath the surface, one that could put him in grave danger. As the howling of the wolves grew louder each night, Ethan found himself increasingly drawn to the darkness that surrounded Ravenwood. Chapter 2. The bookstore owner. Ethan had always been a curious person, drawn to the mysteries and secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. And now, as he stood outside Serena Vaughn's bookstore, his curiosity was piqued by the thought that this woman might hold the key to unlocking the truth about Ravenwood's dark past. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, immediately struck by the dimly lit atmosphere of the store. The shelves were lined with dusty old books and antique artifacts, their faded covers and tarnished surfaces suggesting centuries of untold stories. In the back of the shop, a soft hum of voices could be heard as Serena Vaughn busied herself organizing her books. "Can I help you?" she asked in a hushed murmur. Her long dark hair flowed down her shoulders, and her piercing green eyes held secrets she seemed unwilling to share. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling she knew more than she was letting on. Ethan hesitated before replying. "Yes." He could tell from her expression that he had struck a nerve. She glanced at him warily, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to discern his intentions. She spoke so quietly that her words were almost lost in the evening's gentle rustle of leaves. "I'm afraid I can't help you," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Ravenwood is a small town, and we prefer to keep our secrets to ourselves." Ethan felt a surge of frustration welling up inside him, but he knew better than to press the issue. Instead, he left the bookstore with more questions than answers, questions that would lead him deeper into the shadows of Ravenwood, where darkness and danger lurked just beneath the surface. As the days passed, Ethan found himself drawn further into the mysterious world of Ravenwood. He began to investigate the town's history, learning about its dark past and the myths and legends that still haunted the inhabitants. He visited the local library, where he stumbled upon a journal belonging to Serena Vaughn, the woman from the bookstore. The journal contained accounts of supernatural occurrences in Ravenwood, as well as information about an ancient curse that had plagued the town for generations. Ethan's curiosity was piqued, and he began to delve deeper into the world of the supernatural world that seemed all too real in the shadows of Ravenwood. As he researched the curse and its connection to the murders, he discovered that it was linked to a series of unsolved murders that had occurred over 100 years ago. The more Ethan learned about the curse and its connection to the murders, the more he suspected that a darker truth lurked beneath the surface, a truth that could put him in grave danger. And as the howling of the wolves grew louder each night, Ethan found himself increasingly drawn to the darkness that surrounded Ravenwood. One day, while exploring the town's outskirts, Ethan stumbled upon an old cemetery where some of the victims of the unsolved murders were buried. As he stood there in the dim light of twilight, he couldn't help but feel a creeping unease. His skin prickled as if unseen eyes bore into his back from the shadows between the weathered headstones. And then, out of the corner of his eye, Ethan spotted it. A small silver pendant hanging around Serena Vaughn's neck. It was a simple piece of jewelry, yet it seemed to hold an air of mystery and power. Could this be the key to unlocking the truth about Ravenwood? Ethan knew that he needed to confront Serena about her connection to the curse in the town's dark history. But as he stood in the graveyard, surrounded by the silent whispers of the dead, he couldn't help but wonder. Was he truly ready to face the darkness that lay beneath the surface? As Ethan returned to Serena's bookstore, his heart pounded with anticipation and dread. He knew that he had to uncover the truth about the curse's connection to the recent attacks, if he wanted to protect both himself and the people of Ravenwood. He stepped inside the shop and approached Serena, who was now sitting behind her counter, leafing through an old book. "I know you're keeping something from me," Ethan said firmly. his words low and controlled. Serena looked up at him, her green eyes filled with a mix of fear and anger. "You have no right to meddle in our affairs," she hissed, clutching the silver pendant tightly in her hand. "This town has been cursed for centuries, and it's not your place to interfere." Ethan felt a surge of resolve rise within him. He had come too far to turn back. No, he was determined to uncover the truth about Ravenwood and break the curse once and for all. "I don't care what you say, Serena," he declared, his voice steadier than ever before. "I will do whatever it takes to protect this town and its people." Serena seemed taken aback by Ethan's fierceness, and she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Very well," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But know this. If you continue down this path, there will be consequences." And with that ominous warning, Serena handed Ethan an old map of Ravenwood, marked with symbols and runes that seemed to glow eerily in the dim light of the shop. She told him that it was a key to unlocking the secrets of the curse, but only if he could decipher its meaning and follow the clues it provided. Ethan took the map gratefully, his heart pounding with excitement and trepidation as he set out on his quest to break the curse and protect Ravenwood from the darkness that threatened to consume it. He knew that this would be a long and dangerous journey, filled with trials and tribulations along the way. As Ethan gazed into the swirling mists of Ravenwood's ancient grounds, a chill settled over him. The crumbling stone walls and twisted trees whispered secrets long buried in the shadows. Yet, despite the dread that clawed at his heart, Ethan steeled himself, unwilling to let fear or doubt hold him back. He had traveled too far to turn away now. He would face whatever horrors lurked within the manor, no matter the cost, to protect those he held dear and unearth the truth about Ravenwood's dark past. Serena's emerald eyes reflected his resolve as she stood beside him, her presence a steadying force against the encroaching darkness. Ethan knew that this moment marked the beginning of a journey that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. Chapter 3. Mounting evidence. Ethan stood in the dimly lit corner of Dr. Walsh's office, poring over evidence collected from the most recent murder scene. The room reeked of decay and death, a constant reminder of the darkness that had befallen Ravenwood. He felt an overwhelming sense of urgency as he studied the gruesome photos of the victim, her body torn apart by what appeared to be an animal attack. But Dr. Walsh, a renowned forensic pathologist and Ethan's closest ally in his quest to uncover the truth about Ravenwood's curse, was quick to point out that there were several unusual aspects of the wounds that suggested human involvement rather than a simple animal attack. The victim's injuries were consistent with those inflicted by sharp claws or teeth, but there was also evidence of deep lacerations and puncture wounds, as well as signs of struggle. Dr. Walsh's whispered voice was barely audible as she examined the scene. "The wounds are too precise to be the work of a wild animal," she said, noting the clean incisions that marred the victim's pale skin. And the fact that the victim's throat was slit indicated a deliberate act of violence, rather than mere predation. Ethan nodded in agreement, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the clues and figure out what kind of monster could be responsible for such a brutal attack. As they continued to examine the evidence, he felt a growing sense of dread, a cold, creeping unease that seemed to seep into the very air around them. It was as if something sinister lurked just beyond the edges of their knowledge, watching and waiting. As they worked through the night, Ethan stumbled upon an Old Town record hidden away in one of Dr. Walsh's storage boxes. It contained a detailed account of the unsolved murders that had occurred over the past century, as well as references to Eleanor, the mysterious woman who seemed to hold the key to breaking the curse that plagued Ravenwood. The more Ethan read about Eleanor, he began to question her true age and motives. According to the records, she had been born in the late 1800s, but appeared to be much younger than her supposed age, a fact that seemed to defy all logic and reason. As Ethan continued his research, a growing sense of unease settled over him. He knew Eleanor was somehow connected to the recent murders, but he lacked understanding of how or why. As he delved deeper into Ravenwood's dark history, he began to wonder if there was more to this town and its curse than anyone could possibly know. In an attempt to gain a better understanding of Eleanor's motives, Ethan decided to pay her a visit at her home, a remote cabin, deep in the woods outside Ravenwood. He arrived just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the forest floor and adding to his sense of unease. As he approached the cabin, Ethan could hear the distant sound of howling wolves echoing through the trees. The haunting cries carried an unmistakable edge, a reminder of the darkness that had befallen Ravenwood and a stark warning of what awaited him within Eleanor's home. Ethan knocked on the door, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. When Eleanor finally answered, her green eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light that sent chills down his spine. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice as cold and emotionless as ever. "I have no desire to be involved in your petty game." Ethan ignored her dismissive tone and pressed on with his questions about the unsolved murders and the curse that had plagued Ravenwood for generations. But Eleanor seemed determined to keep her secrets hidden, refusing to divulge any information that might help Ethan uncover the truth. As the night wore on, Ethan's skepticism began to wane, as he witnessed something unexplainably a phenomenon that defied all logic and reason. It was as if the very air around them had taken on a life of its own, pulsating with an eerie energy that seemed to emanate from Eleanor herself. Ethan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread as he watched the strange phenomenon unfold before his eyes. He knew that something dark and sinister was at play in Ravenwood, something far beyond his comprehension or understanding. And as he stood there in the dim light of Eleanor's cabin, he realized that he had only scratched the surface of this town's hidden secret. With the newfound determination, Ethan vowed to continue his search for answers, no matter how dangerous or dark the truth might be. He knew that Ravenwood was hiding something far more terrifying than any curse or monster secret so deadly and powerful that it threatened the very fabric of reality itself. And as he delved deeper into this town's twisted history, Ethan could feel the darkness closing in around him, threatening to consume him whole. Chapter 4. The truth revealed. Ethan had been working tirelessly, piecing together the clues he found about Eleanor and the curse that plagued Ravenwood. He had managed to uncover a series of cryptic notes hidden away in various places around town. They all seemed to point to one thing. Eleanor was not just involved in the unsolved murders. She was the mastermind behind them, using her knowledge of the curse to gain power and control over Ravenwood. Desperate for answers, Ethan sought out Serena once again. He knew that if anyone could help him understand what he had found, it would be her. And so, late one night, he knocked on her door, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Serena opened the door, looking weary but determined. "I know you're here for a reason," she said, her voice barely audible above the sound of the howling wolves that seemed to be drawing closer. "What do you want?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before telling her everything he had discovered about Eleanor and the curse. He explained how he believed that Eleanor was using the unsolved murders as part of some dark ritual to regain control over Ravenwood, and how he feared that she would try to carry out another one during the next full moon. As Ethan spoke, Serena listened intently, her eyes wide with shock and horror. "You're right," she whispered. "I had always suspected that Eleanor was involved in something sinister, but I never imagined that it would be this bad." Together, they began to piece together the evidence they had found about Eleanor's rituals. They discovered hidden markings and symbols throughout Ravenwood, all of which seemed to point to a powerful ritual that would take place during the next full moon. As Ethan and Serena delved deeper into their investigation, they realized that the stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. Eleanor's rituals were not just dangerous, they threatened the very fabric of reality itself. And if she was successful in carrying out her plans, Ravenwood would be lost forever. With time running out, Ethan and Serena knew that they had to act quickly. They gathered their resources and began to plan how they could stop Eleanor from carrying out her deadly ritual. But as they prepared for the upcoming battle, they were forced to confront a difficult truth. They didn't know everything about the curse or its origins. In an attempt to gain more knowledge about the curse, Ethan and Serena sought out the help of Dr. Walsh once again. They explained what they had discovered about Eleanor and her rituals, and asked if she could provide any insight into how they might stop her. Dr. Walsh listened intently as they spoke, nodding thoughtfully at various points in their story. "It's true that we don't know everything about the curse or its origins," she said finally. "But I do know one thing. Eleanor was not the first to attempt such a ritual." Intrigued by Dr. Walsh's words, Ethan and Serena pressed her for more information. She explained that over a century ago, there had been another group of people who had tried to harness the dark energy that cursed Ravenwood in order to seize control of the town. But their attempt had failed catastrophically, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction that had haunted the town ever since. The people responsible for the original ritual were known as the Coven. Dr. Walsh continued, they believed that by harnessing dark power, they could control Ravenwood and all its inhabitants. But their ritual went horribly wrong, causing a massive explosion that killed everyone involved. As Ethan and Serena listened to Dr. Walsh's tale, they realized that Eleanor was not just trying to regain control over Ravenwood. She was also seeking revenge for the destruction of the Coven all those years ago. And if she was successful in carrying out her plans during the next full moon, there would be no stopping her. Determined to stop Eleanor in her deadly ritual, Ethan and Serena began to formulate a plan. They knew that they would need the help of everyone in Ravenwood in order to defeat her, so they set about recruiting as many people as possible. As the days leading up to the full moon grew shorter, tension and fear gripped the town like never before. The howls of the wolves grew louder and more frequent, and it seemed as if the darkness that had been lurking in the shadows was finally beginning to emerge. On the night of the full moon, Ethan, Serena, and their allies gathered at a secret location deep within Ravenwood's forests. They were all armed with whatever weapons they could find, determined to put an end to Eleanor's reign of terror once and for all. As they waited in the darkness, anticipation and fear hung heavy in the air. Then, just as the first rays of sunlight began to break through the trees, they heard it. The sound of footsteps approaching from deep within the forest. Ethan and Serena exchanged glances, knowing that this was it. They had come so far, but now they would have to face their greatest challenge yet. And as they prepared themselves for the battle ahead, they knew that the fate of Ravenwood hung in the balance. Chapter 5. Confrontation. As the first rays of sunlight began to break through the trees, they heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching from deep within the forest. Eleanor was on her way, accompanied by a pack of loyal followers who believed in her cause wholeheartedly. Ethan and Serena exchanged glances, knowing that this was it. They had come so far, but now they would have to face their greatest challenge yet. And as they prepared themselves for the battle ahead, they knew that the fate of Ravenwood hung in the balance. The full moon had risen high above the treetops, casting an eerie glow over the entire town. As Ethan and Serena stood at the center of their makeshift fortress, they could feel the curse's power coursing through their veins. They were ready to face whatever awaited them on the other side of those tree lines. The first wave of attackers emerged from the shadows, brandishing weapons and casting spells in an attempt to disrupt Ethan and Serena's plan. But the pair was well prepared for this type of assault, having spent countless hours studying the town legends and honing their own magical abilities. As the battle raged on, Ethan and Serena worked together seamlessly, using their newfound knowledge to cast spells that repelled the attackers with ease. They could feel the curse's dark power coursing through their veins, giving them an edge over their enemies. But as they fought side by side, Ethan couldn't help but notice something strange about Serena. Her irises had darkened to an unnatural shade of amber, a clear sign that she too was succumbing to the curse's influence. And when she transformed into her werewolf form, he knew that this battle would be far more challenging than he had initially anticipated. As the hours ticked by, Ethan and Serena found themselves facing off against Eleanor herself, a powerful werewolf who seemed almost invincible. But with the help of their friends and allies, they managed to hold her at bay long enough for Dr. Walsh to perform a crucial ritual that would break the curse once and for all. As they prepared to cast the spell, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their struggle against the darkness that had been lurking in Ravenwood for so long. But with Dr. Walsh by their side, they knew that they would emerge victorious in the end. As the final note of the spell rang out through the air, Ethan and Serena watched as Eleanor's body crumpled to the ground, defeated at last. The curse had been broken, and with it, Ravenwood was finally free from its shackle. In the days that followed, life in Ravenwood returned to normal. People began to rebuild their homes and businesses, putting the horrors of the past behind them as they looked forward to a brighter future. Ethan and Serena had become something of local heroes, praised for their bravery and dedication during one of the darkest moments in Ravenwood's history. And while they knew that there would always be new challenges waiting around every corner, they also knew that they could face them together, as friends, partners, and warriors against the darkness. As Ethan looked out over the town he had come to call home, he felt an immense satisfaction at their accomplishments. They had conquered the forces of darkness and triumphed, demonstrating that no matter how grim the circumstances, a brighter future was always within reach. Chapter 6. Aftermath. The sun was just beginning to rise over Ravenwood when Ethan and Serena finally emerged from their hiding place, battered and bruised but victorious nonetheless. As they surveyed the wreckage around them, it became apparent that this wasn't quite the end of their ordeal. Far from it. Ethan rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of what had just transpired. "We did it," he said slowly, still struggling to believe they had broken the curse and defeated Eleanor for good. Serena nodded solemnly. Yes, Ethan, we did. She looked around at the devastation that lay before them. But there's no going back now. Ravenwood is forever changed by what happened here tonight. They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the aftermath of their battle against darkness. As they began to pick up the pieces and start rebuilding their lives, Ethan knew that he needed to find a way to share their story with the world, not just as journalists covering supernatural events, but also as survivors who had faced down evil and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, Ethan devoted himself to researching and documenting every detail of Ravenwood's dark history, determined to ensure that such an event would never happen again. He interviewed witnesses, analyzed police reports, and even spoke with Dr. Walsh about the origins of the curse and its potential future implications. It wasn't long before Ethan realized that his work was having a significant impact on the community. People were opening up about their own experiences with supernatural events, sharing stories that had been buried deep for years out of fear or shame. But with every interview he conducted, and every article he wrote, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. There was still a lingering sense of unease hanging over Ravenwood, as if the curse hadn't truly been broken at all. One evening, as Ethan sat in his small apartment poring over old newspapers and town records, he came across an article from more than a century ago about another mysterious event that had rocked Ravenwood to its core. It was eerily similar to the curse they had just defeated, complete with werewolves, curses, and devastation on an unprecedented scale. As Ethan read through the article, he felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be possible that what they had experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but rather part of a much larger cycle? Was this curse something that would continue to plague Ravenwood for generations to come? He turned to Serena with these questions in mind, hoping she could shed some light on the situation. Do you think maybe there's more to this curse than we realized? He asked hesitantly. Serena nodded thoughtfully. I don't know for sure, Ethan, but I do know that our work isn't done yet. She looked out over the town, a look of determination on her face. We need to keep searching for answers, not just about the curse, but also about ourselves, and what makes us so drawn to this place. Ethan agreed wholeheartedly, knowing that they had only scratched the surface of Ravenwood's dark history. As they continued their investigation, they discovered new clues and evidence that suggested a deeper connection between themselves and the town than either had initially realized. But even as they delved further into the mystery, Ethan couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was still missing. Some crucial piece of the puzzle that could help them understand their roles in this saga and the true nature of the curse. As months turned into years and Ravenwood slowly began to rebuild itself from the ashes of darkness, Ethan and Serena found themselves more deeply entwined with each other and the town than ever before. They had become something of local legends, symbols of hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. And while they knew that their journey was far from over, they also realized that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead together. For as long as they lived, Ethan and Serena would remain steadfast warriors against the darkness, always ready to defend their town and each other with everything they had.